Olá, boa noite a todos. Boa noite aos que vão entrando. Também vamos dar só aqui um compasso de espera para que todos possam entrar e iniciarmos todos juntos. Antes de mais, Alex, you can turn on the video cam too. Are you again?
Very good, thanks.
Então, desde já, boa noite a todos. Mais uma vez, bem-vindos aos nossos webinars da APOC 2024. Hoje, sem mais demoras, já temos aqui connosco também o nosso orador hoje, Alex Jonhson, e de alguma forma já iremos apresentá-lo para que todos o conheçam, quem não o conhece tão bem, e também agradecer desde já a todos os participantes que confiam no nosso trabalho e também queremos desejar aqui a todos os nossos participantes internacionais que também estão hoje connosco. Welcome all to our webinars, our season of 2024. Welcome to this webinars with Alex Jonhson. It's a pleasure for us and welcome. E Alex, eu vou
Hello.
passar, eu vou passar aqui a apresentá-lo, o Alex Jonhson. Vamos só aqui colocar. O Alex, e só um pouco. O Alex Jonhson vai apresentar-nos hoje um tema que são os requisitos fisiológicos da vida, filosofia e a prática da cura pela natureza e osteopatia clássica. E o Alex é osteopata, é filho de dançarinos, dançarinos principais do Royal Ballet, cresceu com a osteopatia e a osteopatia a desempenhar um papel proeminente na manutenção da saúde geral da sua família. E isto também influenciou fortemente o desejo inicial de se tornar osteopata e posteriormente iniciou a sua formação na BSO, na Escola Britânica de Osteopatia, em 1999. A partir de 2000 começou também a estudar Osteopatia Clássica no Instituto de Osteopatia Clássica, bem como a filosofia da cura pela natureza. Concluiu também a sua formação pós-graduada em Osteopatia Clássica em 2006. E a partir de 2009, e por diversas situações familiares, o Alex continuou o seu estudo aprofundado de cura natural, higiene natural e vida biogénica, com o seu mentor, John Fielder, na Academia de Vida Natural na Austrália. E neste momento exerce as suas funções na sua clínica osteopática, que fica a oeste de Londres, praticando a osteopatia clássica e os métodos diretos de cura natural. Defende a gestão natural de todas as crises agudas, sem supressão, e também na gestão de pacientes com doenças crónicas, concentra-se na eliminação das causas de toxicidade, a fim de promover o ambiente ideal para o corpo se curar. So, Alex, it was all in Portuguese, but I
And
think
I kind of got certain words, but I didn't get much. I'm better with Spanish or French, but not so good with Portuguese.
do you know Spanish?
A little bit, yeah, enough.
A little? Okay.
Enough,
It
yeah.
could be a good idea too in Spanish.
You never
In
know.
Spanish, but not today.
No, not today, that's for
Not
sure.
today. So, Alex, you can start
Thank you,
with
Claudia. And I can't see
your
who's
time.
there, obviously. I can't see who's in front. Do you have video screens of people in front of you?
Yes, you don't see them, but yes, we can see, but you can start without seeing them, okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted whether you just could give a rough idea, as I asked before, how many people maybe know of the term nature cure or natural hygiene? Do the people who are there, does the words nature cure or natural hygiene, are they words that they're aware of or not so much?
Not so much.
Not so much. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to, if we if I just start to share the screen. Is that okay?
Yes.
And I'll just go ahead. So, well, thank you everybody for coming to this lecture. And you can you see my desktop now, Claudia?
Not yet.
Hang on, now. Yes, you can see that now.
Yes.
You can see the screen share now. Can you see the screen? Is that up
Yeah.
now?
No, yes. It's perfect now.
Okay.
Okay.
So, thanks everybody for coming along today. I wanted to talk about the philosophy of nature cure and natural hygiene. I wanted to talk about how classical osteopathy and osteopathy is part of that area. There's a huge amount of information I've got to share, so I'm going to go quite quickly. I'm going to go through lots of different concepts. The overview is really, I want to kind of give you a good idea about the philosophy of both of these practices. I want to give you a little bit of history, so that you can see that this was happening in a very grand scale and is the kind of proof of the pudding, or the proof of what's happened. I want to give you the context around how it was used and how it can be used today, and what is a practice of nature cure. Give you some examples of patients and some inspiration for your own practice, and what I call CPPD, personal as well as professional development. So things for yourself to be working on. So quite a lot to get through. So just going straight in, what is nature cure? Nature cure is a term that arrived in the 1800s, and it is about an omnilateral approach, which means a multilateral, multi-angled approach to a patient's environment, and providing them with the conditions necessary for the human body to operate at its optimum level of health. It shows that healing should be obviously aimed at the root cause rather than suppressing the symptoms which appears on the surface, which is, as us osteopaths, we're all used to, aren't we? We're trying not to just suppress the symptom, but understand where it comes from. So nature cure started, as I said, in the 1800s, and the basis is around looking at the fundamental physiological requirements of the body. We could see these as a range of different aspects that the body needs as it traverses life. These are physiological needs. Now, the first few, let's say air, water, nutrition, a hygienic environment, and rest and sleep, or rest and sleep, as well as sunlight, could be considered as paramount. Some of these, as far as air or water, we're talking about minutes or days for the body to survive on. Others that are longer, but these are paramount things that the body requires. On top of this, not so immediately necessary, but in the long term, what is necessary for the human body is physical movement, three-dimensional movement, and a healthy mind, a healthy brain that we're working with. And in an ideal world, the avoidance of toxic materials. So these are sort of ways that, again, these early nature curists started to place the patient from hospital care in the most ideal environment in which they could regain their health. And one of the old terms used to say the greatest drawback to the spreading of the nature cure idea is the necessity of self-control which it imposes. Now, this isn't so much supposed to be limiting you or self-controlling, but finding all ways that we can healthfully take on aspects of our life to give us the best optimum environment to thrive. So nature cure, as you said, is this nice little omnilateral approach, this multilateral approach, and it consists of these 8 different factors. So there's air, sunlight, water, movement, or what we term modern day would term exercise, rest and sleep, nutrition, mental attitude, and spinal integrity. And spinal integrity is the part where classical osteopathy comes in. And this is the wedge that went into this nature cure life that was created in the 1800s. So that when Andrew Taylor Still coined the term osteopathy and developed it and then propagated it in the northern areas of America, osteopathy and chiropractic developed on a bed of nature cure where there were already these huge institutions, which I'll show you soon. So this is a picture of Lindlar's Sanitarium for Nature Cure and Osteopathy in 1906. And it was printed in Lindlar's Philosophy of Natural Therapeutics, which I don't have a picture of the book, but if anyone notes down Lindlar and the name and the word is Philosophy of Natural Therapeutics, you can get it on eBay very, very cheaply, but it's an absolutely fabulous book on nature cure and osteopathy. And in it had this picture of one of the original sanitariums. And I was at Osteopathic College when I first saw this, and I was traveling down to John Wernham on the weekends to learn what was classical osteopathy, because at the time I was at the British School of Osteopathy, which was a very mechanical and a very reductionist version of osteopathy at that time. So I was traveling down to Maidstone and learning the art of classical osteopathy. And I realized that osteopathy was part of this other thing that was called nature cure, and I was fascinated by it. I also noticed that there was another institution in the south called Champneys, which has been bought over many, many years later and does not show how it was at the beginning, which was a nature cure resort. It was a basis of a retreat for nature cure and osteopathy. And in Scotland, there was the Kingston Clinic of Straight Nature Cure, which housed all osteopathy, hydrotherapy, and dietetics. So these were buildings in the past of teaching institutions, only one generation back from me, in the same way that I'd found that when I was at the British School of Osteopathy, it wasn't representing what I felt was true osteopathy. And when I found the classical osteopathy and the explanation and the philosophy that came with it, I immediately knew that the most amount of power came from the history that we have and the information that was given back there. So I have been working over the last sort of 17 years to absorb as much of this old naturopathic information as possible. And so I run an osteopathic practice, but and I give natural lifestyle advice at the same time. And this is my version of one of their little retreats. This is my home in Edge, just outside Stroud. And it's what I always wanted, which was to be able to have a place where people could come and stay, could come and learn, could come and fast, or be learning healthful ways, but they could also come in at times of acute crisis. So where to start? I like to say to people that if you go for an osteopathic treatment or a chiropractic treatment or whatever treatment you're offering, and you give a half an hour treatment per se, just we'll take that arbitrarily, then a half an hour treatment represents 1/48th of the day or 1/336th of the week. So we can see that if we can have a huge effect in a half an hour treatment mechanically, where we're working with a patient, we can have a huge effect on their life. But if we can give them information and we can give them ideas of things that they can take home that will start to tackle all the other 335ths of that portion of the week, then the more that they can employ, the faster that the patient can recover. Now, all of these requirements seem obvious and simple, but they're absolutely essential. So even if a period of the time someone is asleep at night time, we can still make huge adjustments to the quality and the health of their sleep to still allow their body to go through a process of healing and repair. So just looking at very briefly, and I'm only going to mention these quickly because again, I could spend a couple of hours on this entire list, and that's the idea, which is becoming an expert in all of these different realms. But if we just take them simply, the body requires clean, unpolluted air. But it's not just the air that you breathe, it's the way that you breathe. It's the rate, the rhythm, the depth, whether it's down in your diaphragm, up in your accessory muscles of respiration, whether you're mouth breathing, whether you're nasal breathing. All of these things have importance just as much as whether the air is polluted, whether you should sleep with the window open, whether you should go to green spaces or find water spaces, whether you should have plants in your house. The list is endless. The human requires H2O, pure H2O for its cellular activities. And so therefore, as we are 70% water, we should have a daily amount of clean, unpolluted water for drinking and bathing. That's the most important beverage and the only one that we require. Looking at daily sunlight, it's obvious that it's required for hormone balance, for vitamin production, as well as obvious for vitamin D and bone strength. And in this country, maybe not so much in Portugal, but in England, we lack the UVB rays for over 6 months of the year. that we require in order to absorb vitamin D. So whilst sunlight might seem like a strange prescription, if you're in England or in Scotland, there's a great deal of health that can be required, that can be gained from either going on winter holidays or starting to find artificial sunlight replacements. I've put in here a plant-based whole food diet underneath the dietetics for the vast majority of all places around the world, going into preventative and preventative care, and those where they are both removing and reversing chronic health conditions, where they use organic, seasonal, tree ripened, high wild, high raw content of a whole food plant-based diet. We've got we've got the movement, which modern day terms exercise, but employing variable amounts of three-dimensional long lever movement, which also employs sweat inducing to try and get the organ of elimination by your skin working. And then there's this version of, as we said, spinal integrity, which is the part of classical osteopathy. I know that you guys had a lecture recently with Chris Batten showing wonderful signs of the mechanics and the way that we employ. I'm not really here today to teach you intricacies of mechanical treatment. I'm kind of assuming that you may know the benefits, or you are a classical osteopath, or you've done classical osteopathic training, and you know the importance as well as the power that a treatment can purvey. But what I'm here today to do is to really reinforce the fact that the body has its own medicine cabinet and it has its own potential to heal. And these are all of the requirements in order to bolster the patient. So drifting away from our trade being classical osteopathy, again, rest and sleep, it's not just the limit to that, but the quality, the quantity, the comfort, the circulation of the air, as well as the times when you're eating or what you're doing before dinner. So many different avenues to look down for just one quality of one area. And the end result, the mental and emotional poise. This might be from everything from counselling to inquiry to shadow work to meditation and laughter and having supportful, healthful environment. So these are all obvious things, but they're fundamental to a healthful living. So what are the three principles of nature cure? As in osteopathy, we have these grounding principles that the founder gave us that really guide us, and especially when we see Little John, Mr. Wernham, people in the past, they've given us philosophical tools so that we can effectively treat or at least give some advice to almost all patients. So the first one is that the disease, is due to toxemia. This is toxins in the circulating bloodstream. So all forms of disease are due to really the same cause, which is the accumulation in the blood and the body of waste materials and bodily refuse. And so obviously one of the principal factors of nature cure is also going to then be to detoxify the patient. It understands that chronic suppression of acute healing crises, which we will deal with a little bit later on, leaves the patient in a much more chronic state of constitutional health. So an acute crisis, so a chronicity is where the patient has become chronically saturated with toxins. So 4 causes of this toxemia could be considered to be lowered vitality to overwork and stress, when you're absolutely enervated and exhausted, when your vital reserves have been reduced. When you've got the wrong abnormal composition of blood and lymph in your body to do with your lifestyle as well as the diet. An accumulation of waste material because the organs of elimination are not successfully removing the quantity of toxins that are acquired, and mechanical interference with the circulation due to strain and injury. And again, when we look at the nature cure, we could look at all of these versions, whereas the last one, that mechanical interference, is really the interface of the classical osteopath. That's the osteopath that's coming in to deal with that circulation for the free flow of blood, nerve and lymph. Whereas the environment is all around is the nature cure life. The second principle is that all action of the body is right action. This understands that the body is always striving for the ultimate good of the individual, so that whether you are on your last breath of life, your body is still acting in its best interest. It is still striving towards the best that it can. So whilst people generally think something's wrong when they have pain or inflammation, we see this as a sign of healing, that the body is attempting to heal a certain area. So acute crises are considered a self-initiated attempt of the body to throw off extra toxins. It's an extra accumulative effort by the body. And the third philosophy is that the power to heal or cure comes from within the body. This is a very similar principle to that of osteopathy, in that the body has its own medicine cabinet. The body contains the power to bring back a return to normal, providing the right methods and environments are employed to do so. The body is replicating all of the time. We say that the blood, all the red blood cells of your body have a cell life of 120 days. So when you make lifestyle changes, you can know that in 4 months' time, every red blood cell in your body will have been renewed. That is one snapshot, right the way through to the idea that they suggest that every 7 years, every cell in your body is replaced. So your body is constantly replicating and it is constantly healing. And that power comes from within, which some might call the vital force or the breath of life, soul or spirit. But that action, that electricity, that power that is in the human body when we are consciously alive, rather than when we've died, and what is left is a mechanical body which has no life force, the body is always working towards optimum health. So Nature Cure uses a load of different treatments. It uses hygienic methods in the simple act of being clean. It uses therapeutic fasting, more acutely when ill, therapeutic fasting, as well as therapeutic fasting is there to induce the patient. But here we also, when they are acutely ill, this is the easiest time to fast. There's scientific dieting, so just obviously giving the advice towards optimal nutrition. Nature Cure uses hydrotherapy, the use of cold and hot water to redirect blood from the body and to aid as well to support rather than suppress the acute crisis. It uses osteopathy and chiropractic or spondylotherapy, or in the older days it would have been bone setting. These are different terms, and again, it's more important on the person and the philosophy than the term of their practice, as far as I'm concerned. And in the old institutions, they would use mechanical massage as lymphatic or venous drainage, as well as psychotherapy, counseling, and then the use of movement, three-dimensional movement and physical exercises. So again, whilst osteopathy is in itself a complete mode of looking at the body structurally, physically, physiologically, psychologically, there is these environmental factors that we can employ, and these are ones that were used in the 1800s. So, for example, in this 1800s, here is one of the Battle Creek Sanitarium. This was run by John Harvey Kellogg, and I think you'd agree that this is a rather a large building. And this was a nature cure, natural hygiene institution. And in the sanitarium, they used, again, these ranged hydrotherapy, dietetics, air baths, sun baths, exercise, respiration, gymnastics, swimming, mechanicotherapy, massage. All of these employees were using of their patients. This fabulous picture that I have here of them exercising outside, getting their fresh air in the sun as their morning exercise. But to give an idea, whilst they were only treating 106 patients in the year of 1866, by the 1906 they had 700 beds and they were treating 7,000 patients a year. Now, this institution was known to treat way over 200,000 patients, but this was not back pain or shoulder pain or tendinitises, but these were everything from cholera, diphtheria, pneumonia, malaria, all of these deeper constitutional crises, as well as those riddled with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other conditions. So this was not its own standard practice. But again, this was something that really inspired me to look into the principles, because it's what I wanted to try and provide myself in the future. So just to give an idea of some of these, this is one of my patients. She's in her late 60s. She came to see me. She made a load of these lifestyle changes, and we can see within 2 years a vital force that comes back to the patient that hasn't been seen in a long time. This patient is now in her 80s. She's got robust health, and it's been a real sort of, it's always magical seeing which patients take on little changes. I mentioned an acute crisis. I'll go to this later on, but an acute crisis is an ascendancy, an increased eliminative effort by the body. And it comes with a few simple factors. These crises was what were these old nature cure institutions were driving people towards by increasing their vital force, by cleaning their body, and by providing them the environment in which to heal. At certain times, the body will use, as we said, if we start in the lower right side, you'll see the lethargy. So the body starts to go into the conservation of energy. It goes into physical rest. So we become tired. It becomes sensitivity. This is where the nervous system starts to not like loud noises or bright lights or phone conversations or even talking to people. It feels like it wants to go into more physical rest. So it removes itself from the community. But it also, and most importantly, needs to go into a period of physiological rest. And so in order for that, the body reduces the appetite. We have a loss of appetite so that the patient has no desire for food. As well as this, there's the increase in the metabolic rate with certain conditions, not necessarily all of the time, but the body can increase the metabolic rate to increase the amount of elimination via the organs of elimination, and it has a fever. And as we know, Hippocrates was known to say, "Give me a fever and I can cure any disease." Now that sounds like a lot of ego, but it just within it holds the power of the term and the action of fever, that we do not want to suppress a fever within a patient, but understand its cause, and then to support it to allow the body to go through this increased eliminative effort. Now, within an acute crisis when we draw them towards, there are 3 different types as far as I'm concerned. There's a toxic saturation crisis. This is one where somebody has become filled with the wrong foods, the wrong drinks, the wrong lifestyle, and has reached the point of what one call burning the candle at both ends. And they go out one night, they eat one extra meal, they have a kind of shock, something happens that sends their body into an acute crisis where it has to deal with a surplus amount of toxicity. One could think of this as a bit like a hangover. So this is the body trying to survive. That's a toxic crisis. A treatment crisis is when somebody might go towards having a long massage or a really good osteopathic treatment, but they also might go for some counselling, or they might go for some other sort of physical, mental or emotional support. And the treatment lowers the adrenaline a lot in the patient, and sometimes through the mechanical effort of touch through massage or for classical osteopathy, we can affect the physiology, and through reducing the adrenal tone, cause a huge increase in the toxic load, in the toxemia in the bloodstream, as the patient goes to dump toxins from the saturated tissues into the bloodstream. The body can then go into a treatment-induced crisis, so that the person has a treatment, goes home, and the following day wakes up with a cough or a cold or diarrhea. So this is more of a treatment-induced crisis, one that still creates the body pushing it into an increased eliminative effort, but one that might not have come directly from the body itself. And then there's what we call a true healing crisis. A true healing crisis comes from the cellular level, and it comes out from the body on its own accord. It's one when the person has been making changes on their lifestyle, their environment, their diet, their rest and sleep, all of these different avenues, and they're increasing their levels of vitality whilst detoxifying. And then their body at some time goes into a deep healing crisis. At this moment in time, all of those necessaries, the rest, the physical rest, the physiological rest, and the psychological rest become really important in the patient. And that is where these sanitariums, sanatoriums, nature cure institutions took people so that the patient could relinquish control and be cared for in an environment which is conducive to health, rather than one which is conducive to disease from the medical profession, which is solely looking at the suppression of the symptom and none of the removal of the causes. So with the organs of elimination, the body has the skin, the lungs, the kidneys, and the liver, which all work to remove endogenous and exogenous toxins from the bloodstream. These are toxins that are produced from within inside of the body, natural byproducts of cellular metabolism, or those of carbon dioxide, lactic acid, uric acid, or those from external, outside of our body, toxins which are from the toxic chemicals from the air we breathe, the water, the diet, the lifestyle, our stressors. These organs work to remove them. The skin, the lungs, the kidneys, and the liver remove them. Some people include the GI tract and the uterus in the organs of elimination, but Nature Cure does partly disagree with this for a couple of reasons. The firstly, that the gastrointestinal tract is considered a tube from your mouth to your anus, and whilst the food has gone inside of that tube, it is considered still outside of the body. It's only once the food has been broken down and absorbed through the mucous membranes into the structures of the body that it can be considered assimilated. So it's an absorbable, assimilatory organ, but one that does produce vomiting or diarrhea as a purging effect to remove the bolus of food or the food from within inside of the body, so that it stops breaking down anaerobically and producing nitrogenous waste when the patient is acutely ill. So vomiting or diarrhea might be signs of elimination, but it's actually a sign of voiding or from purging from the body. And the uterus had been included as an organ of elimination, but both that and the GI tract are both organs that do not put toxins into the tissues or into the tube that is expelling from, but they do show signs and symptoms of distressed constitution from the outside. But the main factor is to take away is that it is your skin, your lungs, your kidneys, and your liver which filter toxicity from your bloodstream and eliminate it from your body. So a few examples of an acute healing crisis when the body is using these organs to eliminate. So a few examples would be having a fever. This is a temperature as your body increases the elimination and checks and increases the metabolic activity of your body in order to do so. A rash from your skin, or eczema or psoriasis. You could have a cold or a cough or flu or some form of bronchitis or tonsillitis from the mucous membranes of your throat or down into your lung tissue. And you could be aware of some other constitutional problems such as diarrhea or vomiting, some constitutional things such as nausea or headache or other signs of inflammation. These are all considered maybe negative from the medical profession, but from the Nature Cure, natural hygiene side, we see this as a sign that your body is using a vital force in order to try and eliminate toxins from the body. So as we said briefly, these three types of acute crisis, we've mentioned this. So this is the saturation crisis. And this is an old term that says the morbid matter and poisons are carried by means of venous circulation to the organs of elimination. These organs become overcrowded with the rush of morbid matter, and the accompanying congestion and irritation causes the acute inflammatory processes. So these colds, coughs, catarrhs, skin eruptions, they are all healing crises. As we said, this is a treatment-induced crisis, one that can come about through treatment, and the true healing crisis, which comes from the cellular level, which is decided by the body, which it goes into crisis, and it is much easier to manage from the outside. And this creates a new level of health. Mr. Wernham used to talk about the three crashes in classical osteopathy, how you would build the patient up to a better state of mechanical and architectural response to gravity, improve the physiology, but you would be taking them to new levels of health, but they would have to maybe go through several acute crises, which would jump them to a new potential level. I might add at this moment that when I was going 20 years ago to Maidstone, and when I did the postgraduate diploma in classical osteopathy, these were weekend seminars throughout the year with a lot of external learning. But I'd already done the 4 years full osteopathic degree at the British School of Osteopathy, which is now UCO, the University College Osteopathy. But within those 4 years, I was in the college from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night every day for over the 4 years. So if we were to take the version of the classical osteopathy postgraduate diploma and go back over 60 or 70 years, what we would find is that the entire day would be full of subjects such as fasting, dietetics, fevers, acute crises, chronic crises. There would be hydrotherapy. There would be the philosophy behind the ideas of nature cure and classical osteopathy. We would have applied mechanics. There would be all of these different versions of a much greater version of osteopathic learning. And whereas nowadays, obviously, we're learning these postgraduate, but it's just to give this idea of that those years of learning back in the days when Mr. Wernham would have been a student would have been filled with a vast majority of nature cure teachings. And this last quote is that the nature cure never goes through a healing crisis until the organism is sufficiently purified and strengthened to conduct the reaction. So we're not looking to force an acute response out of the patient, but to nurture them towards a higher level of health. It's important to realise that big difference between nature cure and natural hygiene is that nature cure, whilst it was used, it used a lot of therapies, as in osteopathy, chiropractic, massage, dietetics, hydrotherapy, to push the patient towards an acute crisis. Whereas natural hygiene in America was considered more about supporting the environment and watching for those changes within the patient. And actually, it was more termed a let-alone therapy. This is a picture of my mum. Over 15 years ago, my mum was in a poor state of health. She was in cardiovascular distress. She had atrial fibrillation. She was on the verge of diabetes. She was an alcoholic. She was secret drinking. Her body was going through a numerous amount of really difficult, traumatic times. My father had been lost to pancreatic cancer a couple of years beforehand. My mum had been in an exceptional amount of pain because she had 4 hip replacements. She was a professional ballet dancer. She'd had 4 hip replacements, 3 being on one side. So she was walking with a cane. She was in terrible states of health. I use this as one of my first true nature cure patients when I was living with her in a period when me and my wife were traveling around the world learning nature cure and natural hygiene practices and philosophies. And there was a period of time where I was working the classical osteopathic practice from my mother's house, and she was seeing patient after patient coming in and making lifestyle changes. And it encouraged her to make her own lifestyle changes. So she stopped drinking, she changed her diet, she started exercising, she sought counselling, she changed lots of different aspects of her life. And one day her body went into that acute healing crisis. I gave her the option of going down the medical route and taking medication and seeing what they could do, or I suggested that she could stay at home and I would look after her with my wife. And which is what she did. So we employed all of the terms from the physical, physiological, psychological, and emotional rest aspects. Everything from pure water fasting, reintroducing foods. We used hydrotherapy, classical osteopathy, and a general Florence Nightingale style of treating her, in the sense that we were living in the house, and while she was bedridden for nearly 3 months, I was there to take her in and out of bed to get her to the bathroom. But I think that you'll agree that after 3 months, she was quite a considerably different person. She'd lost obviously a lot of weight, but she'd increased in the vital force in her body. Her eyes and everything showed a much greater energy. She no longer was suffering from many of the cardiovascular, diabetic, or other hormonal issues that she had. And the psoriatic arthropathy that she was suffering from was majorly reduced. The picture on the left is what my mum looked like beforehand. Very soon after my father had passed away, and we were both in a little bit of distress. And after the early stages of healthful changes, where she really rejuvenated and gained a good 20 years of life. So just showing you what's little possible at these little interims as I can. So going back, Nature Cure shows that the way to treat the body is through cleaning this morbid soil. It's by strengthening the vitality of the patient by using these usages of sun baths, air baths, by using water and rest so it's optimum, by placing the patient in an extremely toxic-free, clean and hygienic environment, and by educating the patient so that they understand the philosophy behind our classical osteopathic mechanics, the way that we're going to help nurture them into a better architectural and mechanical response. But this understanding of the true life force of the body, the way that it's working, and as we encourage them and educate them, this becomes self-empowered health. And then we use physical movement, employment of daily movement patterns, as well as actual hands-on treatment to improve the mechanics and the effect of gravity on our body and unwind any lesion patterns. This just shows some reduced facial swelling really fast after a large acute response in a patient. Her cheeks swelled up, her sinuses blew up, her nose was twice of the size. Simple physiological, psychological and physical rest, so water fasting only over 2 days, created a huge drop in inflammation that would otherwise be only would only have steroids or antihistamines for their use. This is looking at acute bladder irritation due to the posture and how movement patterns and classical osteopathy can really just within a very short period of time create a vast change within the patient's understanding of where they're standing, so that you can see on the left the tension through his arm, the torso, how the right knee is bent forwards, how the chin is over 2 or 3 inches in front of where the ankle is. And so the effect on the bladder, but it was very easy and important to be able to show a patient that these old osteopathic charts, which I'm sure many of you are aware, you will see the patient on the right, and how the posture, if you look at the organic lesions right down on the right hand side, we see here bladder irritation, anti-flexion and effect on the uterus if you're a female, but the bladder irritation for both, as well as an ear, nose and throat issues from above. So again, going back to this lady on the right, one can see that direct posture in the man on the left. So this is not to remove the direct impact that a treatment can have on a patient, but again, I'm taking this importance to the patient taking home these tools. Again, we can see how the postural effects and changing through treatment is here. And this is somebody, who has a one enlarged leg because of a enlarged artery on that right hand side. So he has a stocking continuously on because of the increased pressure on the leg. But by changing the osteopathic mechanics, one has a huge effect on the venous and lymphatic drainage. And these tools that one can use in Nature Cure, such as the Thompson toe wiggle, ones that was keeping the toes wiggling all of the time, as well as rebounders, breath work, and stretching and movements, all to encourage the patient, so that they can be, as we've said beforehand, rather than the treatment being 1/48 of the day, sending the patient home with principles that they can work for augmenting their environment that they live in. So don't take my word for it. Try and go out and see some of these people. I'm going to just go through quickly some of the history here because I think it's really important. In the 1800s, this Nature Cure was developing across Central Europe. And in America, it was called natural hygiene. And there were some really important people. So even if you just write them down, if you haven't heard of them before, they're extraordinarily important for our history. There was Vincent Priesnitz, who at 17 watched a deer recover from an injured leg going to a stream and using the cold running stream to heal. And by the age he was 27, he opened the first hydrotherapeutic institution where he had several thousand residents. And he was so famous for being a water doctor that the Australian government endorsed a special commission to review him. And he was found to be giving such amazing effect to the patients that they gave him a gold medal. and he was treating over 40,000 patients with less than 45 deaths of the most chronic cases of health that you could see in the early 1800s. There were three other people that, just to mention, take their names down. Theodore Hahn, he used the term nature cure for the first time and added dietetics to nature cure. He encouraged barefoot walking and gardening and gymnastics. There was Lewis Kuhn, and Lewis Kuhn, who again developed hydrotherapy and the dietetics in the early 1800s. And there was Father Sebastian Knepp, who opened up an enormous institution in Bavaria where they used hydrotherapy, cold water, exercise, gymnastics, all to treat the patients. And it was Henry Linlaw, Henry Linlaw, who has that fabulous book, The Philosophy of Natural Therapeutics, which I would really encourage you to get, who was in a terrible state of health at 35 years old. This is a picture of him before he travelled to Europe to be treated by Father Knepp. And after within half a year, he'd lost so much weight and was no longer a diabetic and no longer had any of the health conditions that he had. And he was so amazed that he enrolled in the medical school in Chicago to learn to become a medical doctor, whilst also having instruction by Little John in Chicago, becoming an osteopath. And he set up this institution, as we said, the Nature Cure Institution of Osteopathy. So this is where our bread and butter came from in the past, and it's really important. He went on to open a large sanitarium in nature out in Illinois. And there were, again, where they used osteopathy primarily as a short treatment, sometimes within acute patients who might be from pleurisy or pneumonia, might be very short treatments, but the rest was how they would care for the patient in times where they would be potentially bedridden, using, as we said, air baths, sun baths, dietetics, hydrotherapy, all of these modalities. So the natural treatment, as I would encourage you to do with your patients, is to encourage to economize vitality, to try and save onto your energetics, to try and build up your vital reserves, whilst also trying to eliminate as much waste and morbid matter from the system as possible. To promote as much of the best nutritional assimilation via the nutrients that you give via the dietetics. And then from perfect, let's say, classical osteopathic treatment, to start to deal with the mechanical lesions, which are paramount in the mechanics of the patient that you're dealing with. I would like to read this term because I think it's really, really important. I can't see the top of the screen here, but it says in motor cure, in chiropractic work, in osteopathy and in chiropractic, in nature cure, they both have their ardent advocates. They are their own self-healing mechanism. But so it says, whilst they exist as separate healing mechanisms in the world of healing, those who see in them the sole and only road to cure, osteopathy and chiropractic alone will achieve no lasting results in the effective treatment of disease. And I would put in there, especially those forms of chronic states of disease. However, combined with other forms of natural treatment, so these understandings of physiological fasting, dieting, hydrotherapy, counseling, movement, all of these other aspects, as well as this pristine hygienic scenario for which the patient can rest, these are very efficacious about bringing about the quickest possible return to health of the patient. So it is not only just focusing on the amazing effect we can have on the treatment table, but really empowering the patient to make as many healthful lifestyle changes as they can in their own life, which will allow us to be able to tinker with the mechanics of their body and create ever increasing effects in their life. This is just some acute crisis picture and just shows how the effect of physiological, psychological and fasting is important in acute crisis. I injured my face about 4 years ago extremely badly in a bike crash. The next photo is a little bit gruesome, but I went one night to the bike park with some friends and I knocked myself unconscious on the floor. The first thing I did was I asked somebody to take a photo of me, and whilst they said I needed a paramedic, my answer was, "Don't worry, I'm a classical osteopath. Please get me some cold water, some flannels. Can you get me a mirror, please? And can you get me to the closest water source?" This was in the first part of the evening, and I was taken to hospital in an ambulance, which is the picture you can see on the left-hand side. The right-hand picture is me in the A&E, the accident and emergency area of Gloucester, where I was waiting to be seen. But meanwhile, whilst I was waiting to be seen, I was using all the modalities from cold water through to lymphatic drainage, through to venous drainage, and I was using breath work, meditation, and I was using local functional and classical ways to improve the drainage from the area so that the pressure would reduce. And within a very short period of time, as you can see, you can see by using this on the left hand side, I was able to discharge myself with a picture on the right, where around the cheekbone you can see a slight divot where the pressure is already reducing. I discharged myself from hospital when I was able to do a cranial nerve exam, show them that there was no break within the zygomatic bone, and I refused stitches in the chin. I just employed all of the usages of nature cure, from, as I said, from water fasting through to hydrotherapy. I was applying cold flannels, not ice, but just cold flannels applied to the face so that the heat could be removed from the body. I was water fasting, so I was not stressing my physiology. I was sleeping and resting as much as possible, and at the same time draining my face on a half an hourly basis. I think you'll agree that 48 hours later there was some remarkable healing that had been achieved. And on the left picture on the left, you'll see around my neckline how red it is from venously and lymphatically draining that area. This healing carried on very quickly, again using everything from air baths to sun baths to hydrotherapy, cold and warm water applications, various degrees of fasting, juicing, through to healthful dietetics, lots of rest and sleep, as well as meditation and visualization of the healing. When we talk about toxins, we're coming soon to the end of our talk, so I'm still trying to get through as much as possible of these different avenues. As you can see, if you're enjoying hopefully this talk and you're interested, maybe we can delve into some of these each individual topics a little bit further at a later stage. So I do realise that I'm going at a very rapid speed, so I'm hoping that you can keep up and that this isn't too fast or too much for you. But I wanted to just talk about toxins, since which we are obviously it's so important in this toxemia. Endogenous toxins, these toxins that come from inside of our body, carbon dioxide, uric acid, lactic acid, and the byproducts of cellular breakdown. But then we have all of these other exogenous toxins that are around us in the air and water and food that we have. Everything, as the generations carry on and there are more toxins from the medications and the vaccinations that we undergo, from the toxic chemicals that are in our house, in our air, in the environment that we live, as well as the cosmetics that we use directly on our body. There is an awful lot for the organs of elimination to use. And so, as we've said, this acute crisis is an increased eliminative effect for the body to reduce the state of toxicity and create a better environment of healing. Some of these terms that are out there saying the healing crisis is an acute reaction resulting from the ascendancy of nature's forces over the disease conditions. And the one at the bottom, which I think is very important, which is, if acute diseases are treated in a natural way, there will be no chronic diseases to cure. So from a chronic state of health, a patient needs to go in the opposite direction to whence they came. So throughout the life, we'll tend to find that our body has attempted to have acute eliminative efforts, whether it's coughs, colds, rashes, spots, and the body very often has been medically and pharmacologically and pharmaceutically suppressed. So the acute crisis that would have taken the patient from, we've gone from health to a state of disease. The acute crisis was there to allow the body to detoxify and move back towards a state of health. However, if it's suppressed and the organs are not allowed to do this elimination, we are further saturated in a state of toxemia and we move further towards the chronic state. So it makes sense that when you have a patient that comes in who is in a chronic state of disease, it's as we go through a healthful journey and they lose weight, as they detoxify, as they change their mental, emotional, and physical and physiological patterns, that their body may reach a stage where it goes into this acute crisis. And if we're aware of this, what the acute crisis is and how to manage it, we understand that it's a time that we can feel quite excited about it. Whereas the vast majority of people feel very down and very upset that, oh, it feels shame, I'm having another illness. Whereas it's not understanding that that is your body's process and the way in which you're getting back towards health. So the most important things I relieve you again with that healing support is physical rest. This is allowing ourselves to rest and sleep and providing the perfect environment. To have physiological rest, to go into a water-only fast. This is very different when we have an acute reaction, rather than a therapeutic fast, which is us instigating a fast in a patient, or a patient instigating a fast in themselves because it's just the right time of year or it's a holiday. Nature Cure looks to push the patient into ever increasing levels of health, and it's when they go into their own acute eliminative effort, they will naturally undergo physiological fasting, which is where their body will simply have no appetite for food. And psychological rest, which is the most important, this understanding that the knowledge of the benefit of the acute crisis is what is allowing you to travel through periods of discomfort or to hold patients in their discomfort, knowing this is their way of cure. And chronic disease, as we said, is a state where the body has become toxically saturated with the byproducts of cellular metabolism. Give the opportunity, give the organism an opportunity to clean, and it will eliminate its wastes and rid itself of toxins, providing it has the necessary vitality to do so. And if it hasn't got the extra vitality, we cannot supply it with this special force, and all of our attempts will be forcing it to work by stimulating its activities, only weaken it and hasten the end. These old terms that were used by people to say, Herbert Shelton being a very famous natural hygienist, stop all the enervating habits, stop the absorption of poisons from the outside, give the organism an opportunity to recreate its dissipated force and increase its vital force, and supply all of the environmental conditions required by the patient. As we said, these are lots of things I'm going to scooch through because we're getting right to the end of this lecture. All of these elements like sunlight, that's fundamental for requirements of life, the use of rest and sleep when our body goes into its deepest elements of healing, by using physical, low resistance, high impact and high repetitive movements to incorporate deep breathing in the body and to improve venous and lymphatic drainage. And we go to see the osteopath for that spinal integrity part, as we've seen from the physical health side. Look for the emotional poise, ones that support our mental health and reduce that of fear, anger, and worry. So please, this is where we need to all find a practitioner to support us and support our children, because it's very often when we have a loved one who is in the middle of suffering that we need someone from the outside to just ask these questions. What kind of crisis is this? Is this a healing crisis? Is this a toxic one? Is this a disease crisis? Is this the right action of the body? And when you're looking at sometimes your loved ones, this can be quite hard. Fabulous. So I think I'm gonna leave it there for the moment. Claudia, are you there, Claudia?
Yes,
I realise
yes,
that
Alex, I'm here.
we are going right on an hour at the moment here. So I thought I would just take a little pause because we've hit a lot of different subjects, and I wanted to just open up and see how people were doing, and if there were, I've got other things I can chat about, but if there was anyone who had some direct questions that they wanted to just start giving me a little bit more focus, that would be great.
Yes, yes, probably we will do it because we have some questions about probably the final part.
Yeah,
So don't worry about it.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
we
great.
can manage it. You can turn off if you want.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see the new share. How do I get out of here?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so then how do I stop the share? Okay, let's do that for the moment.
Yes. So,
Okay.
em português, too. Vamos dar este espaço também para debatermos aqui algumas questões e partilharmos com o Alex questões que vocês queiram fazer chegar. Podem colocar no chat, se preferirem, ou mandar-nos individualmente. So we have some space to put some questions
Yep.
to Alex. So if you want, you can put on our chat or send to us as you want, okay? And Alex, we can start. We have
Yep.
one question from our participant, Abel Santos. Is asking you about, for you, what is a correct diet?
Yeah. I would suggest a predominantly plant-based whole food diet, rich in raw and fresh fruits and vegetables. Personally, I've been plant-based or I've been vegan for many years. But I think what's important is that it's important for the individual also where they live in the world. From a nature cure perspective, we should really be living within the tropics. Because within that time we have a lot of these physiological requirements, especially as sun, which is strong enough all year round. But in those tropical environments, we have a plethora of high calorific, high density fruits, which we otherwise don't have access to, let's say, in England. So if I was able to have any form of diet, my optimum would be a high fruit and a high vegetable plant-based diet. But a lot of those fruits would be high in calories coming from the tropics. So things like jackfruit, durian, pineapples, mangoes, ones that have a higher sort of calorific source. Now, of course, the further that you travel away from the tropics, and the further you travel away from what would be considered from nature cure as an optimum living environment, we have to start making adjustments to that diet. And so within that adjustment, as you travel further north, you just simply don't have the access to those high calorie fruits and vegetables. So we have to start making adaptation, and that adaptation came through cooking. So it's times where we start to use things like carbohydrates, whether it's potatoes or brown rices, which we have to cook for sometimes long periods of time to get rid of some of the elements that our body can't handle. But it allows us the calorific load to be able to go through the winter. Obviously, it's not necessarily raw, as we've spoken about in the past, where people have looked at indigenous populations in Alaska or different places where they have a high, predominantly sort of animal diet. But again, this is when they are living in an environment which is not conducive really for human thriving. So even with that raw diet, they don't live very long time. So the optimum diet, as far as nature cure is concerned, is a predominantly plant-based diet, supplemented in certain countries where necessary, where you simply cannot grow those materials. But also knowing that our body is able to consume vast amounts of all of the wrong foods and live for very long periods of time and make huge adjustments.
Yes. But we certainly agree with you, because sometimes it depends a lot of where you live,
Yes.
how you do it.
Yeah, it's what you have access to, and it's also
Your access to this
and
kind
a
of food.
nice, sorry, a nice way for us to sometimes say to people is, if you were to remove electricity and heating, see how quickly you'd survive in the countries that you'd live in. I mean, if there wasn't electricity or heating, I would move from the UK. I would go further south, because it wouldn't be possible to survive through winter without certain versions in an ideal world. We don't have the temperature, we don't have the diet, we don't have those things that are around us. We now have the ability through electricity, and we have through heating to be able to live in environments where our body is not at its physiological best. So with that comes compensations.
Yeah, sometimes we have to choose the best for our body too.
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
not easy too.
Yeah, exactly. So the nuances are very different whether you're speaking, if I'm speaking to a patient who's living in California, someone who's living in Glasgow, someone who's living in Cairns in the rainforest, someone who's in London. There are different what's available, and one could have the conversation as to whether that environment is good for their body in itself. But when we look at nutrition anyway, the answer to the question is almost every single institution, sanitarium, health center around the world that works to reverse chronic diseases and place the patient in the best position in which to heal from serious conditions are all predominantly plant-based.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for your answer. We have another question from Miguel Martins. Miguel is asking about probably the final part of your presentation, how we can help our patients to become more aware of the cure and healing process. Do you have any practical advice for us?
So practical advice to help patients.
Yes, probably some. What do you advise for us if we want to send some message for our patients without all this, of course, this nature cure process, but
Yeah.
do you have some advices?
Yeah,
Practical ones.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is within that it's nuanced, because it depends what we're dealing with. That my patient list is so varied, that if you have everything from newborn babies or premature babies through to patients in end stage cancer care. So with a lot of these, I think the important part is there's the process of what we're doing with a patient, which is important, and improving mechanics, lymphatics, improving the way that the body is working. But it's still enforcing the fact that their body is doing the healing. We're only removing blocks. So the tendency is to start to give a daily routine almost for the patient to start to integrate these different elements of healthful living into their lifestyle, because otherwise it can be they've gone to see the osteopath, they've had their treatment, and they go back to their life and they don't change the way that they work, they don't change the way they sleep, they don't change what they're eating, they take no responsibility. And it can be still very easy when we have such ability to change the patient in front of us using the classical osteopathic approach, for example, that we can still show them, well, this is what we need to achieve in order that their body can be better. And that is absolutely correct. But it's how they sit in the car on the way home, and it's what they drink that evening, and it's how they go to bed and what they employ over the next 2 or 3 days that will make the vast change to the outcome of their condition. Now, that might be acute but low back pain or some form of sporting injury. But if you want to start dealing with someone with their cardiovascular issues or their diabetic issues or their deeper autoimmune condition, then we have to empower the patient to take on that responsibility. So that question is really broad, but it's obviously it has elements to setting up a sort of almost like a daily patient list for the patient, what they should eat in the morning, where they're going to fit their movement in, how they're going to step away from their desk, how they're dealing with their mental emotional poise, what they're eating at lunchtime, how they're going to sleep. You're literally trying to give them, and so whether you have that as their own consultation outside of the quiet treatment that you're giving them, it's this importance that if you give them an amazing treatment for their disc problem of their lower back, but you don't give them any advice as how to sit, and they're going back and sitting at a computer for 9 hours a day, then we're missing the point. And I think it's really important to just keep going back to these simplistics, and you can break almost every single part of their day up, and over a period of time start to give them more and more processes to benefit. Does that answer the question a bit?
I think so, because I think so, Miguel. But what you are saying is very interesting, because we need to speak with our patients with this kind of vision that is very important to make it think about the routines, and the routine of one patient is not the same of another. And
No, but when I was, if we go back to when I was when I was a couple of years first qualified, and I was already done the postgraduate diploma in classical osteopathy, and at that point I thought that I could really make a difference. I could change the world by treating people, because the effect of classical osteopathy and osteopathy is so strong in its physiological effect on the body. But I had removed the fact that it was still the ego from the patient, that we can do this to you. I'm going to start treating. I'm going to change the physiology, and whether the patient's coming in with eczema and asthma, how we're changing the blood circulation and the physiology in the patient, and that's absolutely correct. But as I said, when John Wernham or people were learning classical osteopathy back in the day of osteopathic teaching, the vast majority of their day was how to care for the patient and how to take people through these acute reactions. It wasn't the treatment. Sometimes that treatment might be 2 minutes in a whole day. And so it's everything else. That's why they had these patients that lived in their hospitals. That's why a lot of the patients, when you have big constitutional changes, they need to come and stay with you or to live the lifestyle, because integrating, whether they're having trouble to fit in a 2-minute stretch in the day that you've given them, that's just not enough if they want to kind of help reverse their diabetes. So the amount of changes have to increase with the severity of the state of ill health within the patient.
yeah. Thank you very much, Alex, for your answer too. And but it is very important to think about our plan with our patients too. It is important to this kind of vision to talk with our patients, and to make it in the simple way that they can understand.
Patients have no trouble in thinking, I've got to take my anti-medication every 2 hours. And they're very good at doing that. But they can still be very bad at going to the osteopath, having a treatment, and saying whether they get better or not is because whether the treatment was good or not. And it's again putting that position of power and encouragement into the patient, that they are the ones doing the healing. We are the ones that are helping guide their body towards better functioning, but we're improving blood supply too and removing drainage from areas. But they have the vital force. They're the ones doing the healing. So all of these natures on the outside, and once they realize that, it's really strong self-empowered healthcare. So it's from the day they wake up to the time they go to bed. If you have someone who's a terminal cancer patient, that's what their life becomes. It's how to suddenly make all of these changes aggressively. And what I encourage patients to do is to take on as many healthful lifestyle changes as possible that you would do if you were really chronically ill, but do it early enough that prevents you ever getting chronically ill in the first place.
Thank you very much, Alex. The time is running. We want more,
Yeah, no more.
but we don't have more time.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry about it, but
Don't be silly. It's these are huge subjects, and you know, hopefully if people are interested in learning more. As I said, please contact me. Go through
yes,
the website, myhealthandhappiness.co.uk. Please reach out to me either through that or to get me on Instagram. Just ways that I might just be able to support or just show that this is something. And I end with these principles have allowed me and my wife to step away from the medical profession for over 23 years. We haven't taken any form of medication or used any medical intervention over those 23 years. That includes my wife having 2 children at home. None of them have ever, neither of our children have ever seen the doctor. But that doesn't mean that we haven't, you know, managed their measles or scarlet fever or coughs and colds at home or injuries, or like you saw when I smashed my face at the skate park, hasn't enabled me to discharge myself from the hospital and have a good understanding of the process of what you need to employ in order to get your body better. So whilst these principles are there, we've enabled us to step away as an alternative to medicine rather than alternative medicine. Okay.
thank you one more time.
No problem. Okay.
And probably see you soon.
Thanks very much. Okay.
So thank you one more time for all your presence tonight. Obrigada a todos pela vossa presença. Agradecer também em especial aos nossos patrocinadores que estão presentes nesta nossa edição 2024. E são eles a Eubage, a S4Med, o Girassol e a Hibernate. Sendo que hoje temos este patrocínio oficial deste webinar com o Alex Jonhson por parte da Hibernate, e eles também nos querem deixar uma mensagem e vamos desde já passar a apresentá-los.
Olá a todos, o meu nome é Luís Sobreira, sou licenciado em Biologia e sou delegado da Hibernate. Tenho aqui 3 minutos para passar-vos uma informação que pode ser útil para vocês e para a saúde dos vossos pacientes. Então vamos a isso. A Hibernate tem mais de 6 marcas de suplementos de alta qualidade e cosmética natural e biológica. É distribuidora em Portugal. Para vocês, osteopatas, eu de certeza que têm vários pacientes com diversos problemas osteoarticulares, certo? A Hibernate tem alguns suplementos com ação anti-inflamatória, tem outros que atuam nas cartilagens e nos ossos, e também tem cremes de massagem articular e muscular, que depois poderão conhecer. Hoje gostaria de destacar uma das marcas de alta qualidade de suplementos, a Cura Vitasan. A marca Cura Vitasan é um laboratório de alta qualidade, fabrica no Canadá suplementos com a mais elevada tecnologia. Grandes critérios de qualidade para a obtenção do máximo de eficácia no produto final. Portanto, ficam aqui com uma ideia: produtos sem pesticidas, sem metais pesados, alguns dos extratos das melhores plantas do mundo, algumas vitaminas e minerais, na forma mais biodisponível, etc. Ficam aqui com uma ideia geral de alguns suplementos. Fiquem com o nosso contacto depois, porque vão ter acesso a todas as fichas técnicas pormenorizadas dos ingredientes que estão em cada produto, e aí sim vão perceber a diferença. Portanto, suplementos de cálcio, vitamina D, magnésio bisglicinato, vão perceber que é uma das formas mais biodisponíveis, mais facilmente absorvidas de magnésio. Os suplementos que atuam na cartilagem e com ação anti-inflamatória vão perceber também o que faz a diferença nos suplementos da Cura Vitasan, as concentrações, os princípios ativos, a garantia da eficácia deriva de todos estes fatores. Também os anti-inflamatórios de fitoterapia, anti-inflamatórios enzimáticos, enzimas, ômega 3, temos várias opções. E para terminar, ficam aqui a conhecer um suplemento, tem um nome assim um bocadinho estranho, difícil de dizer, a sigla é PEA, mas é um composto que o nosso corpo já conhece, portanto, produz quando as células têm inflamação. Quando há doenças crónicas, verificou-se que a suplementação de PEA diminui a inflamação e a dor. Isto em vários casos, como por exemplo, neuropatias, dor generalizada, ciáticas, miastenia, por exemplo, inflamação na temporomandibular, nos joelhos, são apenas alguns exemplos. E por último, resta-me agradecer a vossa atenção. Tomem nota do nosso contacto, porque é através dele que podem, por exemplo, enviar uma mensagem, telefonar ou enviar um WhatsApp, a pedir então todos os catálogos, que nós enviaremos com todo o gosto, esclarecemos todas as dúvidas. Também poderão saber, por exemplo, como é que os pacientes podem adquirir os suplementos conforme a zona geográfica, locais de venda, algumas lojas de suplementos, farmácias, e também como adquirir a nível pessoal e familiar com algumas vantagens. E podem esclarecer todas as dúvidas com o delegado da zona. Para isso, basta então deixarem o vosso contacto enviando para nós. Obrigado pela vossa atenção e esperemos ajudar no futuro. Obrigado.
Então, sem mais demoras, nos despedimos. Obrigada mais uma vez. Thank you for all, Alex. And see you soon. Obrigada a todos. Uma boa noite.
See you. Bye.